Hello everybody, this is Fernando for the latest special edition video. Alright, this is going to be part 2 of the Dallas Comic-Con or Dallas Fan Expo trip that I'm going to chronicle here. This one, again, is part 2. The first part, please, if you have a chance, take a look at it. It's where I talk about pretty much getting there to the convention center and then also all the really good things associated with it. So if you have a chance, be sure to check that out too. This one I wanted to save and talk about some of the bad things. And bad things is, again, as I mentioned at the end of the other video, it's a strong word, but basically it's all the stuff that still needs to be worked on when it comes to going to these Comic-Cons, in particular this Fan Expo. So not really too much of a video in terms of it being too long, because there wasn't really too many items that were bad per se, but still it merited making sure that they were separated on the side, and then I'll give my overall feelings of the Comic-Con too. So again, let's talk about some of the bad things here. Now, I did focus a huge portion of my other video talking about some of the good items involving in particular Q&As. Q&As, those of you who have known me for the longest time, you know how much I love the Q&As. It is the absolute, to me at least, the best part of a Comic-Con, because you have, in essence, yourself, the audience that's with you, all there for your favorite guest, as your guest participates usually around 45 minutes or so in light banter, light chattering, and then answers a whole bunch of questions for yourself and other fans. So I love Q&As, and especially because, at least to this day, most of them are still free. Obviously, there's still some others that start charging for Q&As, but there has been a lot of resistance to that. Thankfully, fingers crossed, that resistance will continue, and then that way Q&As still remain, at least to me, the hallmark of going to any location. So it was no exception this go around. I definitely had my trip planned as far as attending Q&As throughout Saturday and Sunday, and even though I had a ticket to attend on Friday, with regards to that day, the only reason I didn't end up going is because, to me, the Q&As, none of them really stood out, so it wasn't worth it for me to attend and having to spend time basically finding parking or using the DART system and all the time associated with it. So now instead I saved, thankfully, all the Q&As, the best ones, were going to be on a Saturday, and then they're going to be on a Sunday. And as I'll showcase throughout some of my other videos and then videos going forward, some of the Q&As that I went to were fantastic. Like the Frank Miller one was fantastic. The Todd McFarlane one was fantastic. There was another one by Dan Slott, one of the comic book writers, that was really good too. And then some of the Silent Hill people, the singer of it, I attended hers as well. You'll see those videos also throughout my channel. Now, in this case, the bad part was, well, as much as I love Q&As, there seems to be like a love and hate relationship with the Q&As from a Comic-Con perspective. Obviously, the Comic-Cons, it's tradition nowadays to have Q&As, to continue to have Q&As, but it seems like there's still a lot of hesitance from either the Comic-Con, let's say, creators or the actual guests themselves. Maybe it's because from a business standpoint, there's no money being made, and a lot of potential money being lost, because a lot of people that are like me, they love going to the Q&As because they're free, and it's a chance to be able to hear the guests without having to necessarily pay for that experience per se, like in the form of a signature, waiting in line for a signature, or photo op type stuff. No, in this case, you can go to that experience and basically have it free with your included ticket cost, and that way you're part of it. But here, and in some cases maybe the guests also do not like it, besides the Comic-Con makers, because of the potential loss, but from the guest standpoint also on their end, there's that same potential loss of income, because the people that attend the Q&As, there's a good chance most likely they won't be going to the signature booths for those same guests, so that's more loss of income. I'll draw the curtain back a little bit. I know a little bit of the Comic-Con world from the backside of, let's say, behind the scenes type stuff, and the way these Comic-Cons usually work and the way that they have the guests contracted are, they get a guarantee for attending. So let's say, I'm just gonna throw someone out. Like, let's say it's someone from the past 90210 days, somebody from that show. Well, whenever they're guaranteed to come on, then the Comic Con makers, they'll say, okay, we'll grab you here for this Comic Con, whoever you are, either actor or actress from that 90210 show, and we'll guarantee you, I'll just throw a number out, like $20,000 for attending those 3 days. And the way that guarantee works is the sale of the $20,000 will actually come from you and I. It'll be from the fans, because everybody that goes to that 90210 guest's booth and let's say either gets a signature or even the photo ops included too, well, all those dollars go towards making sure that guarantee is made. And the idea is, from the Comic Con maker's perspective, when that $20,000 is reached, then that money no longer has to come personally from the Comic-Con makers or owners. Instead, that guarantee is made. And the reason why that guarantee is there is, let's say the opposite happens. Let's say it's a deserted booth throughout the entire 3 days. Nobody comes for those 90210 guests. Nobody cares about them. Let's say they only see just a handful of people. Well, for separating their time for that Comic-Con, even if they only made a couple $100 from the actual signatures and photo ops, those guests have a guarantee of $20,000. I'm sorry, was it saying 10? It was one of those. So in any case, when that happens, then the Comic-Con has to reimburse the guests for the remaining dollars up to that guaranteed amount. So again, going with, let's say in this case, $20,000 figure, if that's made from the actual fans, then there's nothing the Comic-Con makers have to pay. But if it's not made up, then they have to make up the difference themselves. So that's why Q&As still seem to be a love-hate relationship, because they pretty much take out a lot of the business or potential business for both the Comic-Con makers and then also the guests, because some guests, this is absolutely their costs. Like, this is how they make their living. It's their career in a lot of cases. They just travel around the country doing these Comic-Cons, and when that happens, any potential loss of income could be seen as detriment. So I've run into situations where some guests, they will gladly just cancel Q&As left and right if they feel that maybe things are going on a hot streak, or maybe they don't want to make sure that they want to look good still for the Comic-Con makers, and so they'll cancel their Q&A. And in that way, all those people that had to, that wanted to ask their question or meet the guest in person, well, now they're going to have to go visit that person in the signature booth, and guess what? Pay a fee for that. That's what I felt was kind of happening here this go around, because there was, and I'll focus on this picture here, you'll see that out of all those Q&As, how many were scratched out. It's almost as if more were scratched out in terms of things being canceled than people actually showing up. It's also, there's the side factor that it could be from the guests, not from a financial standpoint, but because again, they're doing this for their living. They probably visit one Comic-Con every 2 weekends or so. They're getting tired of the same questions, like how many times can you be asked about so and so scene from so and so movie and try to provide the same answer and make it seem, I guess, original or not seem tired. That's not necessarily the fans' fault, of course, because from the fans' perspective, they're just barely meeting these guests for the first time. But from the guest perspective, having gone through probably like 50 other Comic Cons throughout the year, there they are being asked the very same question again. Now some guests are awesome guests. Like, they know that the fans are there, that this is truly for them, that they want to make sure that the fans enjoy the entire experience, even if they're not getting paid at a Q&A for it. And then others, they just completely see this as, let's say, just something that they don't want to do, but at the end of the day they kind of have to. Though that seems to be at least the focus there, because I was interested in seeing Joan Cusack, I was interested in seeing Vivica A. Fox, Jim Cummings, who is a renowned and famous, very famous voice actor. He's practically done everything in terms of cartoons and movies and films. I was hoping to see his, and then there was even going to be a comedy show that I wanted to attend, not necessarily a Q&A per se, but it was going to have, I guess, its own variation of either fans or some other form of comic actor, like the stand-up comics show up, and then that would be great to hear. All of them were ultimately canceled, so that was not good. Some of it is out of their control, the Comic Con creators' control, because they, I guess, some of the guests canceled days beforehand. But if that's the case, there should have been something like made up, like maybe another Q&A. Like, let's say even double, like let's say if someone already did a Q&A the day before, well, why not do another one for the fans that were planning on seeing someone else, but then that Q&A was canceled. So it definitely seems to be the case, and this one is part of this event particularly highlighted it, that the Q&As no longer seem to be the main focus when it comes to it. The Comic-Con places like Fan Expo and others, they pretty much want to make sure that they get their guarantee with regards to the guests, and then that way they don't have to pay out of pocket for them. So if the Q&As are there, fine, but if they have to go, they're the first thing dropped, in other words, and that seems to be the tone that I saw there. The other thing that I wanted to mention that was bad about the location were the pricings. Some of the guests, they're getting crazy ridiculous in their pricing. I don't know how fans do it these days. I've stopped getting signatures and I stopped getting photo ops probably almost like 2 years or so back. It was just something where when the pricing of the ticket to just get in is getting a little crazy, and then you have pricing of photo ops getting crazy, and then you have pricing of the actual signatures getting crazier, and then you still have to have money separated for all the knickknacks, the stuff that the vendors sell, and those are getting a little bit crazier, then something has to drop. And in this case, at least for me, I can definitely get away with not having to deal with any of the celebrity guests or any of the other guests and their signatures and photo ops, because that stuff that just either hangs on the wall or it goes in some kind of binder and then just stays on the corner. I'd much rather talk about an experience. I'd much rather go through an experience, and that means again visiting my beloved Q&As, or like I mentioned in my other video, doing a whole bunch of vendor walking where I'm not necessarily shopping, but I'm just browsing the booths and then taking in all the beautiful, beautiful stuff that people are selling, and then looking at all the drawings and so forth. So how much of it of a control is from the Comic-Con creators' perspective? They still say to this day that it's beyond their control. Like they'll say, well, the celebrity's manager is the one that decides this, or the celebrity themselves decide this. But still, I mean, they should have some control, only because when you have like some actor or actress who not necessarily is huge anywhere else, but just in the Comic-Con world, it's a little bit crazy that they would start charging insane prices like 50, $60 for a signature, when anywhere else they wouldn't even be able to show up at a premiere and get front page or front coverage just from a Comic-Con perspective. That's the only thing that they would be good at. So how these prices, I don't know how they get to be, who knows, but it's definitely driving away people's perspective of like in my case, of stating what's important and what's not. So as far as these insane prices, yeah, there were some there. I think Shatner's was still above the $75 mark. I think Stan Lee's was the same too. So, and those guys, they go to every single Comic-Con. I mean, they don't know how to say the word no when it comes to these things. Like they're practically there every weekend at someplace else. So, how much control? I still believe that the Comic-Con creators still have a bunch of control over it, but they still let it whatever works, I guess they'll still let it be. So as far as the bad stuff, that's the only thing I can mention. But that's it. Not too much else. Otherwise, the Expo did a pretty good job when it came to the venue. A lot of the Q&As that were available for people, it kind of sucked on my end because 4 of them I wanted to go to were canceled, but for a lot of other people that had interest in other stuff, they were still there. There were a lot of cool contests, a lot of cool workshops, a huge assortment of vendors, huge range of guests, pretty much the full gamut. of guests that you could work with. The only bad stuff again I mentioned was it really stood out that in this case the Q&As were the first ones to go if they truly needed to be gone, and then also the pricing. Those are the only two bad things that stood out. So anyways, be on the lookout for more of the Q&As that I recorded. I'm going to finalize those and then that way share them for everyone as a treat. So alright everybody, thanks again as always. Take care.